If you all hadn't noticed, the Children of the Corn remake just came out this last weekend. In order to prep myself for the movie, I decided to watch the original beforehand because I had never seen it. So this review is going to explore both movies, compare them, go over which is better and in what ways. Similar to my nostalgia test videos, but those vids never get any views, so here's my attempt to bypass the algorithm and get some more people to actually watch this vid and those. So suck it, YouTube. Let's get spooky. Okay, let's just get this out of the way. I saw the original Children of the Corn for the first time, and it is not a good movie.
Blasphemy!
Now, keep in mind, I never read the book, so this opinion is just on a movie level. And this is a very old movie, so I am going to spoil it and recap it very quickly. So the movie starts off with probably the only good scene in the entire film. There is a diner scene where some kids poison half of the adults there, and while the other half of the adults are attending to the poisoned people, the kids murder them. And then everything is downhill from there. Sarah Connor and her doctor husband are on a little road trip and accidentally hit a kid in the middle of the road. The doc examines the body and notices that the kid's throat was slit before he ran him over. Lucky break, am I right? So they go to a further town because a hick gas station attendant said the closer one is no good. So they try to go to the further town, but keep getting misdirected to the closer one, or there's some supernatural entity that is making it so they can only end up there. I don't really know, and it's not really explained because it could go either way. Anyways, they get to the town and it's a ghost town. No one is there. Well, except for a cult of children with their own prayers, rituals, ceremonies, hierarchy, and false god of worship. Now, this is a very interesting idea, but we don't get to see any of it. The couple gets split up and Sarah Connor gets held captive in the corn, while the doc puts all of the kids in their place pretty easily. Like, how did an entire town of adults fail to do this? Anyways, he gets a bit wounded and is helped out by some of the younger kids, and they eventually take him to the corn where his wife will be sacrificed. Meanwhile, there is a little uprising within the kid cult. The leader, who is kind of like a prophet, gets usurped by one of the older kids who is considered the muscle of the cult, or just the most bloodthirsty. Not super surprising, kids are pretty easy to intimidate.
Could you beat like 12-year-olds?
I fuck up 12-year-olds.
Okay. Sure, maybe.
100%.
What if they're organized?
They don't have a chance.
Night comes and the doc is ready to bust out his girl, and up until this moment, other than the little girl drawing some future visions or whatever, there really isn't any other indication that these kids' cult has any legitimacy. Like, they could just be crazy. So the doc comes in guns blazing, not literally, otherwise this would be a much better, different kind of movie. So he saves his wife pretty easily, and in the last few minutes, a tremor type monster comes in and kills the old cult leader. He comes back from the dead and kills the new cult leader that usurped him. The kids run and hide from the monster, and the doc and the kid that helped him out earlier set all of the corn on fire, and the movie ends with them essentially adopting the two kids that helped them out and said fuck off to the rest cause who cares? And that's the original Children of the Corn movie. The only good scene in the movie is the diner scene at the very beginning. The rest is filled with bad acting, horrible CGI, meh violence, and a story focusing on the least interesting aspect of the whole scenario. How did these kids get away with killing an entire town's worth of adults? I mean, sure, it's a small town, but judging by the number of kids in this film, that's what, 50, 75 adults? How did they pull that off? Especially when the doc puts them in the place with relative ease. How could they possibly have done that to so many people? Do you know? Because I sure as shit don't. And you can bet that that is exactly what I would want to know. The process of eliminating all of the adults on the word of a cult leader who claims he communicates with a demon god that lives in the cornfields that they've grown up around their entire lives is way more interesting than a movie where 95% of the screen time takes place after that. Right after the movie ended, my first thought was, alright, I'm glad they're gonna try to remake this, because this movie sucked. In hindsight, a remake of a very old and not very good movie that has garnered like cult classic status sounds like the perfect idea for a remake if you were gonna do a remake. And better yet, the remake actually focuses on everything I was just bitching about. The new movie focuses on the process of the kids taking over the town in a murderous fashion. Sounds awesome, right? I'm gonna spoil the remake now. Not even gonna bother doing a non-spoiler section. This movie sucked. And again, never read the book, so I have no idea if the original is truer to the book or if the remake is. don't care. Pretty sure the book is better. The bar is pretty damn low. The movie starts off with one of our main characters, Eden, playing outside a children's home. An older kid comes out of the corn and immediately grabs a knife and starts knifing all of the adults in the place. So the police and some local farmers stick a gas hose into the children's home in order to gas out the older kid. And we zoom in on a classroom of passed out or assumingly dead kids, and then we jump to a few days later.
What? Oh, come on!
What the fuck just happened? Did the police and the locals just kill an entire classroom of kids just to kill one kid? Why not just huck grenades into the place? I'm sure it would accomplish the same thing. Did I miss something? Did those kids make it out? There's a newspaper article stating that 15 people died in the school. Were they all adults and the little ones were just knocked out for a bit? It's really not explained well enough what exactly just happened. Anyways, we cut to our main psycho little girl, Eve, who is getting interviewed by the local pastor because they know the boy who killed all of the adults in the children's home spoke to her beforehand. And all the while he is talking to her, she's struggling to do one of the last 5 pieces of a puzzle, but the pastor is able to help her out by flipping the puzzle around, and she's able to put the piece into place.
Are you retarded?
Poop in the shoes.
Are you a retarded person?
Poop on the shoes.
And the scene ends with her saying some cliche bullshit like, "I'm surprised he didn't kill all of you," or something. I didn't write it down and I don't really care. We jump to our other main characters, 2 siblings, older sister Bo and younger brother Cecil. They're walking through the corn and Bo is complaining about all the chemicals in the corn and that they can cause hallucinations, kind of giving off the impression of what might be the cause of what is going to happen later on, of course for those who are familiar with the franchise. But she also says that she's going to be leaving town because she got a scholarship, and Cecil hates that she's leaving him in a shitty town in a shitty family situation that he will never be able to escape. Later on, there is a town meeting and their dad is leading the charge to make some serious decisions about the corn. He proposes that the only way forward is to sell off the land or the right to farm it to the government or something because the corn doesn't grow and the chemicals that they were kind of forced into using messed up the soil. Everyone blames the chemicals, but the preacher thinks it's an act of God. The adults put it to a vote and they vote in favor of selling it because of everyone's struggles. Then Bo speaks up saying that there is another way to save the soil or the corn. Their dad shoots it down saying that it would take years to undo the damage that's already been done, which, I mean, yeah, there are farmers. If you have like 2 bad seasons, you're fucked. Nicely laid out plan, Bo. So the dad asks the whole town to vote and all of the adults except the preachers say yes, let's sell. But then Eve chimes in and says, not everyone voted. What about the kids? To which the adults berate them in the most over-the-top and comically bad way. Is there anyone or any scene in this movie that's not an overplayed cliche? I know we are just getting started here, but this is a rough start. After the meeting, Bo tries again to convince her dad to change his idea, but he says there is no changing it and the deal is done in 2 days. Meanwhile, Eve has a montage of convos with a couple 10-year-olds. No dialogue, of course. It's not like we would want to see if she's got what it takes to convince a few dozen kids to do what we all pretty much know is about to happen.
You serious, Clark?
Bo talks to her friends about what possible solutions, and she's like, humiliation! Okay. So her idea is to get a famous reporter there to tell the story of how the town got screwed over in the corn industry. So she goes to Eve to ask her to get her parents and all of her friends' parents to the courthouse for a surprise meeting at 10 p.m. Fuck knows why. You really think an 8-year-old could convince their parents to do something like that? Also, keep in mind, the whole time Bo is asking Eve to do this, her and her friends slaughtered a pig and are using paintbrushes to smear blood on the roots of the corn to feed it.
I think that's a red flag. I don't want to get stabbed.
Bo also asks Eve to get the news reporter to the courthouse. Really? You're gonna leave the most important part of this mission to this fucking 8-year-old psycho? Who is 8? We know that you have friends around your age, high school age, that could take care of this. Why aren't you asking them? So nighttime comes and they tie up their dad and take him to the courthouse. And when he wakes up in handcuffs, he just sighs and says, sure. I don't even care anymore. So they get there and Eve is sitting outside with another friend and a horse. The writers were wondering what's another overused cliche to make Eve seem cool or whatever, so they just toss her an apple and she starts eating it after completing her sinister plan. They go inside and see an abusive dad with a noose around his neck and it's tied to a horse. Eve pulls the horse because the rest of her friends are too stupid to go for the rope around the horse and instead went to go grab the abusive dad by his legs and of course his neck snaps. Okay. I've had enough. I'm not going into too much detail anymore. Eve shows Bo that they brought all of the adults, and I mean all of the adults in town, to the jail cell, and they were all locked up. Fuck knows how they were able to pull that off, because all of the kids that are a part of this cult are between the ages of like 8 and 12. Eve gasses them and brings half of the adults to a hole in the ground in the corn, and Bo's brother, who is now super on board, drives one of the trucks and buries the parents alive, one of them being his adulterous mother. It really amazes me how none of the parents tried to be physical with the kids up until now.
What if they're organized?
They don't have a chance.
They don't have a chance?
Nope.
If they all come at you at once?
Nope.
Even the high school kids don't even really try that hard to, shove these kids around a bit, like at least intimidate them.
Well, what if you start training them at a young age?
I'm gonna fuck them up.
Is it really so intimidating when a couple of 10-year-olds get in your face with some farming tools? Keep in mind, this is a farming town. You'd think everyone and their grandmother would have a gun. There are 0 guns in this film. Let's move it along. Eve wants to execute the reporter, but Bo is like, nah, let's offer her to the corn. So they go to a barn and see some of Bo's dead friends. Who gives a shit? And they offer up the reporter to He Who Walks, and he doesn't show. Oh, so it was the chemicals making everyone hallucinate. Oh, never mind, the monster shows up and takes the reporter into the corn and rips her in half and throws the parts aside. Why? Does it not eat? Was it for the corn? Why do I bother asking questions like this for a shit film? So Bo gets the upper hand and sets all of the corn on fire, and Eve willingly walks into the fire along with a monster who shows no sign of pain or caring that it's on fire. Imagine that, a monster made completely out of corn stalk, not giving a shit about being on fire. Oh, and Bo's brother comes out of nowhere and just nods his head to his sister like he is okay now and everything is fine. Yeah, nice try, dickhead. Like 3 hours ago you helped murder 30 people and one of them was your own mother. So we then jump to Bo walking around all the burned corn, and she finds Eve's ring and holds it in her hand, and then it disappears. And then she gets scared for some reason, as if that meant she was crazy. I don't know. But Eve's burnt corpse pops up behind her and says something like, "Nothing ever dies in the corn." And a bunch of corn stalk comes out of her and rips into Bo's body, and the movie ends. Okay, honestly, that was pretty cool. Like, it made me feel like 90% of the movie's budget and time was spent on that one scene, which kind of makes the movie end on a high note, but nice try. I'm not falling for it. This movie sucked harder than that wormhole in the end of Monster Squad. I'm not crying, you're crying. So, the new Children of the Corn sucked for a couple of key reasons. First, the villain. Eve is a terrible villain. There was never a single moment that convinces you why she's in charge. In the original movie, the leader was essentially a prophet. The deity spoke through him. But that doesn't happen in this one. She has no powers, no charisma. There is I think one line that she says to Bo's brother that's something like she will take his pain and turn it into his power, which I guess is enough to convince a kid to bury his mother alive. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but for me, that wouldn't cut it. I would need more convincing. Also, all Eve does is smile, walk confidently, and constantly twirls around her farming scythe. Second, the movie did a great job in focusing on the more interesting aspect of Children of the Corn, the part where all the kids massacre all of the adults in the town, but I guess the writers weren't smart enough or didn't want to spend enough time on how the kids would actually be able to pull that off. I guess it would be such a dumb idea to show that, so instead they just do a scene cut where all the adults are just magically placed inside the sheriff's jail cell. Really? You didn't think it would be important or interesting to show these kids actually pulling this off? Keep in mind, in the first movie, the doctor kind of effortlessly showed these kids who's boss, and most of them were too afraid to stand up to him. And the only ones who were the older kids, and they got their asses handed to them. They only got the upper hand by having the element of surprise, which is more than likely what would actually happen in real life. Keep in mind, these kids aren't mostly high schoolers. There's like 2 13-year-olds, and the rest are probably 11 or younger. Third, Bo is not a very good protagonist. She says she has other solutions to save the town, but gives no explanation on how she would actually be able to pull it off. Like, what exactly would they have to do? How much would it cost? How long would it take? Nothing. She's just a girl with a dream. Gee, what a mystery kids like this aren't given a vote in a town hall meeting where the fate of the entire town's income is at stake. Fourth, it seems like they lean into the idea a little bit on the kids could be crazy because the town is lousy with chemicals thanks to what they've been putting into the corn. Okay, but that's kind of thrown out of the door in the first 15 minutes of the movie because there's this scene where this kid throws a rusty lawnmower blade into the field and there's no character around, but we see the corn stalks surround and pick up the blade. Who is that for? Us? The audience? Oh gee, thanks for telling us that there actually is a monster in this movie. Kind of begs the question of why even bother teasing the chemicals messing with your brain idea. Also, the monster sucks. It's just cornstalk. It really doesn't look that cool. The CGI isn't very good, and going off of everything else we see in the film, I don't understand what benefits you would get from worshipping this thing. Eve likes him because after the massacre in the beginning, she wandered into the corn for a few days and he took care of her. Okay, is that really all? Because we need a reason why the other kids would so easily turn on their parents and be open to slaughtering them without remorse. There is no scene where any of these kids show even a sliver of guilt for what they did or what they helped do. If you want to know my opinion on which movie is better, probably the original, but it's not by much. These are both bad movies. When it comes to the violence, neither really had enough for this kind of a story. The dialogue and the acting isn't very good, but I would say the remake has more going against it than the original does. And on Rotten Tomatoes at this current time, I think critics give it like an 8% and audiences give it a 30%. I mean, they're both really low, so it doesn't really matter or make too much of a difference which one I'm leaning more towards. Let's just go with the critics this time. I usually am more on the audience's side, but this movie sucks. There's no reason to see it. Don't see it. Watch this vid. Feel free to watch my other ones, but don't see this movie. Don't spend your money. I beg you. And that's all I gotta say. It doesn't seem like a lot of people even knew that this movie was coming out. Go figure. I hope you all liked the video. Thanks for watching, and stay spooky.